You don't belong here. This room isn't for people like you." The words cut through the room, heavy with disdain. A sleek, modern boardroom, filled with white faces and one black CO. Derek Hayes, calm and composed at the head of the table. The tension was palpable. All eyes were on him, but he didn't flinch, didn't argue, didn't even blink. With a steady hand, Derek pulled out his phone. He unlocked it slowly, his fingers pressing one number with quiet precision. "It's done," he said, his voice low but sharp. "Pull everything today." A VP sneered. Another one leaned back, shaking his head. "That's the last time we let HR make hiring decisions." Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from and make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's story is one you won't want to miss. Security began to step in, and the murmur of disbelief filled the air. Someone in the back pulled out a phone, already filming. One of the board members chuckled. "What's he gonna do? Sue us into bankruptcy?" Derek didn't even look at him. He turned to leave, his pace measured, his calm unbroken. But then, just as he reached the door, he paused. "2 hours," he said, his voice unwavering. Then everything flips. The room burst into laughter. They thought he was bluffing, thought they were untouchable. But in just 2 hours, their empire would fall. Quietly, precisely, with no chaos, just the swift, unforgiving consequences of a game they hadn't realized they were playing. What followed wasn't loud. It wasn't messy, but it obliterated everything they thought they had. Derek left the boardroom, his heart steady, though his mind raced. He knew exactly what was coming. But the board members? They had no idea. Walking down the marble hallway, his footsteps echoed as he made his way to his office. Samantha Hayes, his assistant, was waiting for him by the door. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with concern. "They're not just going to let this go," she said softly. "They can't." Derek raised an eyebrow. "You think they've learned nothing? They think they're untouchable. But they don't know how this game works." Samantha gave him a nervous look. "What's the plan, then? You've already got them on edge. But what are you?" "I've already pulled the trigger." Derek's tone was calm, confident, almost like he'd been preparing for this moment his entire life. Samantha opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She had worked alongside Derek for years, but she had never seen him like this. He was always the rock, always a composed leader. But right now, there was an aura of something else around him, a quiet storm that was about to break. "Stay close, Sam," Derek said, his voice low but urgent. "I'm going to need you more than ever in the next few hours." As she nodded, he took one last look around his office. The city sprawled out beneath him, an endless maze of glass, steel, and concrete. He had built this empire, every inch of it, and now he was about to watch it burn or rise anew. 2 hours later, the boardroom had changed. The tension from earlier had thickened into a cold, suffocating atmosphere. Derek wasn't just about to lose his position. He was about to expose them for everything they were. Inside the boardroom, Mark Palmer, the chairman, paced nervously. The other board members exchanged glances, unsure of what was about to happen. "Where is he?" Mark muttered, his voice tinged with irritation. "He can't seriously think this is just going to go away." Another board member, Thomas, shrugged. "He's probably still fuming, trying to figure out how to spin this. Maybe he's learned his place." Mark scoffed, shaking his head. "This is ridiculous." The board voted. "He's gone." But no one in the room looked confident. They had underestimated Derek from the start. They thought they could push him out without a second thought. They thought he was just a figurehead. What they didn't realize was that Derek wasn't just a CEO. He was playing a much bigger game. The sound of footsteps echoed down the hall. Everyone in the room froze. Derek had arrived. As the door swung open, Derek entered without saying a word. His eyes were focused, his posture unshaken. The door clicked shut behind him with finality. Mark stood up, his voice harsh. "What is this, Derek? You think you can just walk in here and—" Derek raised a hand. "We're done with the theatrics, Mark. You made your move. Now it's my turn." For a moment, the room was silent. Derek's presence filled the space, his quiet strength overwhelming the chaos of the last few hours. I already told you, Derek continued, his voice cold but clear. In 2 hours, everything changes. Mark sneered. What are you going to do? Pull out the financials and try to scare us with some fake numbers? Derek didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a tablet. He placed it on the table, sliding it toward Mark. Open it. The other board members leaned in, curious. Mark hesitated for only a moment before tapping the screen. His eyes widened as the information came up. A financial report. A deal. A deal so big, so far-reaching, that it made everything the board had worked for seem insignificant. This is impossible, Mark whispered. It's not, Derek said, his voice unwavering. This deal went through hours ago, and it's going to destroy everything you've built, unless you're smart enough to walk away. The board members exchanged nervous glances. The silence in the room deepened, broken only by the soft hum of the AC. You did this? Mark stammered, his arrogance suddenly replaced with fear. You've been planning this? Derek's expression never wavered. I don't play games, Mark, but you've been playing with fire, and now it's burned you. The board members shifted in their seats, their confidence unraveling. This wasn't just a simple corporate shakeup. This was an empire on the brink of collapse. Outside the boardroom, the phone lines were buzzing, emails were sent, and security was ordered to stand by. But Derek wasn't worried about the fallout. He had already anticipated it. He turned to Samantha, who was standing in the hallway just outside the boardroom, watching the chaos unfold through the glass window. It's done, Derek said, his voice calm. The deal's set in motion. We got one chance to get this right. Samantha looked up at him, her eyes wide. But Derek, if this goes public, if the media finds out about this, let them, Derek interrupted, let them see how this plays out. As the minutes passed, the reality of the situation started to settle in. Derek had successfully executed a deal that would put Novice Solutions in a position to dominate the tech world. But it also meant taking down the board members who had betrayed him. It was a delicate balance, a calculated risk, and it was all about to come crashing down. The hours passed quickly. By the time the media outlets caught wind of the breaking story, it was already too late. Novice Solutions had lost its investors. Its stock had plummeted. The board members were scrambling to save face. But Derek wasn't in the business of saving faces. He was in the business of dismantling systems of corruption. The fallout was swift. Legal teams were mobilized. Press conferences were held. The media had a field day. The board members who had once belittled Derek were now under investigation for insider trading and financial misconduct. Mark Palmer was fired on the spot. Thomas, another board member, was arrested. Derek watched it all unfold from his office, the glass wall before him reflecting the city as the storm raged outside. But inside, he was calm. The battle was over, and he had won. By the time the sun set over the city, the news had spread like wildfire. Derek Hayes wasn't just the CEO of Novice Solutions anymore. He was a symbol of justice, a beacon for those who've been trampled underfoot by those in power. Samantha sat in her office, eyes glued to the screen. News outlets were running stories nonstop, broadcasting interviews with analysts, corporate experts, and, inevitably, disgraced former board members who were doing everything they could to deflect blame. The once mighty corporate empire was crumbling, and there was only one person to blame, Derek. But Derek wasn't interested in the spectacle. He had already moved on. The board had been replaced. The toxic culture had been purged. Now, the real work began. Derek walked through the newly refurbished hallways of Novice Solutions the following morning. The company's sleek modern design had always been meant to represent power. But now, it felt hollow, a reflection of the old leadership that had used the company as a vehicle for their own ambitions. His footsteps echoed through the empty hallways, the air thick with a strange mixture of anticipation and uncertainty. The atmosphere was different now, quieter, but there was also a certain electricity in the air, an unspoken recognition that the company's future was on the line. As Derek approached the conference room, he could hear voices from inside, staff members discussing the next steps. The room fell silent as he entered. "We got a mess to clean up," Derek said, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "But the first thing we're going to do is rebuild trust. From the ground up." There was no longer the usual pomp of business. As usual, the people in the room knew what was at stake. Many of them had been there for years, working tirelessly under the old regime, and many of them had seen firsthand how Derek's leadership style had been undermined by corruption at the top. But now it was different. They were ready to follow him, not just as their CEO, but as someone who had stood up against the injustice that had defined the old ways of doing business. "You're in charge now, Derek," Laura, a senior manager, said, her voice strong. "What do you need from us?" Derek paused for a moment, looking around the room. He could see the glimmer of hope in their eyes, the hope that had been missing for so long. "I need you to trust me. Trust that what we do now will be better than everything that came before." He nodded, taking the weight of the responsibility now resting on his shoulders. "We're going to do things differently from now on. From the top down, we're changing the culture. We'll have no tolerance for greed, for manipulation, or for anyone who tries to stand in the way of fairness." There was a murmur of agreement around the table. It was a start, but the work ahead was monumental. There was no time to waste. As the days turned into weeks, Derek began the delicate work of turning the ship around. The new leadership team, a diverse group of men and women who had been handpicked for their integrity and vision, worked around the clock. They met with investors, addressed public concerns, and most importantly, began re-engaging with the company's employees. For the first time in years, people were starting to believe in the company again. The media continued to follow every development closely, broadcasting stories of Derek's bold moves. Interviews with analysts and former colleagues painted Derek as a hero, a man who had not just reclaimed a position, but completely shifted the business world's view on leadership. Derek's leadership was quiet but firm. He didn't waste time on speeches or empty promises. He got to work. And soon, Novice Solutions began to show signs of recovery. The company's stock, which had plummeted in the wake of the scandal, began to stabilize. Customers returned, eager to buy from a company that now stood for something different. But the change wasn't without resistance. A week after the new board members took control, Derek was called into a meeting with a small group of executives from one of the company's largest investors. They were skeptical, questioning whether Derek could continue the company's growth without the aggressive strategies that had worked for the old board. Derek, James Cooper, a senior executive from the investment firm, said as he sat across the table, his fingers steepled in front of him, "You've proven you can clean up the mess the old board left. But now, you need to prove that you can get us back on track. The numbers are good, yes, but we need more. This company was built on cutting-edge innovation, and without us pushing forward, we'll never be able to compete with the big players." Derek's expression didn't change, but inside, a part of him bristled. The old Derek would have been eager to prove himself. He would come up with flashy plans to appease these investors. But not anymore. "I didn't take this position to be a pawn in someone else's game," Derek said, his voice calm but carrying a clear edge. "Novice Solutions will grow, but will grow with integrity. I'll lead the company into the future, but I won't compromise on the values that have guided me my whole life." James leaned forward, narrowing his eyes. "And what if those values aren't enough? What if investors want more power, more results? What then?" Derek met his gaze, unwavering. "Then they can find someone else. But I'm not going to sell my soul to make a profit. This company is going to stand for something bigger than just money. And if you can't respect that, then maybe it's time for you to find another investment." The silence that followed was thick with tension. James studied Derek's face for a long moment, as if trying to figure out if he was bluffing. Finally, he leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. "You're a stubborn man, Derek Hayes. But maybe that's exactly what this company needs." It wasn't long after that meeting that the remaining skeptics began to come around. The company continued to show signs of recovery, and Derek's steady leadership started to pay off. By the end of the quarter, Novice Solutions was not only back on track, but its reputation was stronger than ever. Derek had done it. He had taken down an empire built on greed and manipulation, and rebuilt it with something far more powerful: integrity. As he stood in front of the company's new headquarters, modern and sleek, a symbol of the change he had brought, he felt a sense of calm. This was only the beginning. He wasn't just the CEO of Novice Solutions anymore. He was a leader who had challenged the system and won. And now, he would lead them into a future built on fairness, transparency, and the undeniable power of doing the right thing.